So it's a pleasure to have everyone back here. This is going to be a rapid fire. So let's do a lightning round. And I think in the lightning round, it's a simple question about, in your mind, for HCD to work in Nigeria, the one thing for you that must move is?
Thank you very much. I think the one thing that must move is financial inclusion. And the reason is for us to have real, tangible, consistent improvement in real economic growth. Every Nigerian adult has to be financially included. That's the starting point.
Interested. Yes.
For me, it's prioritization in policy and resource allocation.
Okay.
For me, from the perspective of for Federal Minister of Education, I would say that we need to get a lot of our citizens educated, especially the out of school. With an educated population, things are easier across board. So with all the resource allocation, all of that and so on, if we get more people adequately educated with the right education, with some quality, I think things will be easier going forward.
Okay. It's funny, I'm hearing financial, I'm hearing all that. I'll surprise you. For me, it's awareness. I was having a conversation with he's myself, so we're talking. And I said that we have the National Orientation Agency. We have the Ministry of Information. If indeed this is a disaster, or a disaster waiting to happen, we don't need to wait for any implementation. Even from what the presidency has said, fantastic. It's clear that they know what they're doing. Awareness is key. A lot of us within ourselves belong to various bodies, institutions that have CSRs. This is the first time, and I think I'm a bit educated, this is the first time I'm coming here, sitting down, and it's not just about the unemployment rate. We all know the data. But the alarm, people are not aware how bad it is. So for me, it's awareness.
Okay, thanks. For me, it will be coordination. And by that, I mean an integrated whole of society approach. I've looked at these issues from various angles. Government is not coordinating. The private sector is not coordinating. The NGOs are not coordinating. Nobody is coordinating. And so although there are efforts, pockets of efforts in various places, even without additional money, additional effort, just bringing them together in a coordinated way would make a huge difference.
Okay, thank you very much. I come from Federal Ministry of Youth Development. We supervise National Youth Service Corps. Many of us must have heard of the program called SAID, Skill Acquisition and Enterprise Promotion.
So what's the one thing that must change?
Just like as he said, coordination. Because if you go to camp, they are trained in several skills. But the question is this, is there any coordination for them to continue after camp? No. If there's coordination, you won't see people carrying this thing looking for jobs. I met one of the trainers. He said he's a beneficiary of SAID, training on solar energy. He makes 1 million every month. But the question is that, does government have the data of corps members after leaving camp to ensure or to coordinate whether they actually implemented what they learned in camp? I tell if they have that, it will reduce unemployment. Thank you.
Let me just give you some reassurance in that regard. I'm privileged to be on the presidential committee to reform NYSC and ongoing. So you hear some good news soon.
Thank you very much, sir.
Fantastic. And it is good when things come together. When your headache and a solution collide.
I'm very much aware of that committee. In fact, I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah. When a headache and Panadol collide is a good meeting. So, back to you, sir. You represent one of the most powerful financial institutions on the continent of Africa. And when you say, when an institution with a footprint that literally means that, you know, you're really not a Nigerian bank, you're really Africa's banker in the true sense of the word. When you say that the problem, the one top thing to tackle is financial inclusion, you know, what is your, because it means that you, in your mind, if I tackle financial inclusion, the rest of the human capital cascade will naturally fall in place. Can you just explain what your theory of change is? Because we may be missing something, you know. I haven't heard that up. I've not heard anybody say that. But now that you said it, I can think of why you've said it, but I could be wrong. So why are you insisting on financial inclusion? I mean, beyond being a banker, it's good for your business, which is a concept of business sustainability, right? You pick a problem and look at it from where your business works. But other than that, what else? What else is the reflection?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, there's a commercial case, but it's much more than that. When you think of improvement in well-being, at the core of it is economics, okay? Every individual has to live a life that is sustainable. People think about the basic things: food, clothing, shelter, education. They're not free, and that's the reality. And there's a limit to what government can do for you, okay? The resources of government are limited. And we cannot allow government to do everything. Even from aid, it's also limited. And so at the core is every individual has to be positioned to be able to live a life that is independent, okay, without relying on handouts. And if you want people to be independent, you need to first of all give them access to financial services. And when I say financial services, it's not just about having an account and being able to transfer money. No, that is the starting point. So people first have to be able to, and the beauty of financial services is the moment you have an account, the moment you can start with the basic stuff, you begin to create history. And that history is relevant for you to be able to access those financial service products that can allow you to grow, even exponentially. And loan is a very good example. And so we want people to have access. We want people to be able to save, because through savings, you can grow, okay? We want people to be able to invest. Through investments, you can grow astronomically. And then we want people to also borrow. And so that is the whole concept of the whole philosophy around financial services. First, bring them on board, let them have an account, then they start doing the basic stuff. By the time we see the track record on the basic stuff, we'll be able to give them funding, not just for their personal well-being, but to start businesses, to start something. You may have whatever the idea is, but you need funding to be able to live that idea, create jobs, be able to fund, start up a family, fend for your family, pay for their education, pay for their health care, and so on and so forth. So we think it's actually the starting point to be able to access whatever we've been talking about.
That's interesting, because for the 11th year in a row, right, the State of Entrepreneurship report in Nigeria shows that for MSMEs, access to finance remains still
the number one pain point,
the biggest headache. And we were having a conversation with the Minister of State for Industry, and we said, if truly you have 40 million MSMEs, 40 million, and all we did was we made each MSME profitable enough to hire one person in 1 year. We've met our job creation target for 10 years in 1 year.
MSMEs are the largest employers of labor.
Yeah, but I mean, if we could just get each one to have it to create one sustainable job, that is 40 million jobs.
Absolutely.
And so whilst, and the reason why I ask is that whilst it looks far away, it's close. If you really could solve inclusion, financial inclusion, and create that one sustainable job, you've transformed job creation right there. So really powerful. Thank you. SAP, you've now been at this for a while. 30 months has gone plus, about 18 months left in the government. If we were going to create an 18-month runway for you, non-negotiable, get the work done, what will be the 18? What must we say? What must we say to you, or what must you say to us that is now your non-negotiable, must happen, lock in, finish, deliver in 18 months?
So there will be a myriad of things.
It can't be plain to you. It's 18 months.
No.
And we know that there's election, there's primaries that have started.
It's strategy, execution, and that reporting and performance management. And for the strategy is to get many states. If we can get all the states, because we already have a national blueprint, it's just for them to take it on board. And maybe UNDP can avail their innovation center, maybe we take it regionally, because that's why even the Focal Persons Forum, we want them to nominate a chairperson per region so they can talk about the nuances. We attempted, the South-South organized, they even did a regional strategy. So you see differing pace, so that hand-holding of that strategy, so each state has charted out a suitable strategy for their maturity level.
Can we match the focal person at regional with private sector? And the reason is that I presume the focal person has been appointed by the executive in office now.
Yes.
Please, I guess my second question on that, because you make an important point, get it deeply embedded and owned. But can we match your public sector focal person with a private sector focal person, especially because the inevitable executive transition creates a gap.
We can do it. There are 36 plus 1 that are just like me. Some are even DGs of a HCD agency.
So they are tenure. They even have some time beyond the.
We had to reactivate because most of the governors were new. You remember that most of the governors, but it means there's an 8-year run. Because of likelihood is most governors will come back and then they would remain hopefully the same focal persons, and we're just about to convene them for a workshop in Abuja, so there's that window to engage and see. That's one. For the execution, there is the HCD councils that the states are meant to be holding, chaired by the deputy governors. So they convene. We need to make sure that happens. And that's why I said that prioritization. Because prioritization solves it all. Then, we need to make sure that national dashboard is up and running. So even private sector, if they want to invest maybe in out of school, they can go and look at where are the red areas, and then for the performance management, most of the data maybe is once in a 4-year time that the result is measured. So we definitely for performance management need to identify indicators. I know at a point NGF, I think they have a couple for the health sector, but holistically, so we are able to measure how we are progressing. But you see, for us, it's tricky because we do the advocacy. Then, of course, the awareness, the campaign, that we need to ramp up, and hopefully, and it's like leveraging the data so people understand that gravity in creating innovative content to disseminate. And that's why the 2 staff we've recruited, which DHI helped with that process, is 2 people, one dedicated to traditional media and one dedicated to social media. And the social media is a very young person, that can be creative around engaging, especially young people.
So it's very interesting you say that, and Dr. Joey, I mean, you've dealt with national data for a lifetime. And I want to come to you before I come back to the representative of the minister. Some people are of the opinion that there is a political motivation. We had a national data accountability workshop in December, and the stakeholders, not on HCD alone, on all planning data, and the stakeholders reached a conclusion. Are we on camera? Yes, we are. Okay, so let me say it correctly. The stakeholders reached a consensus without saying they were reaching a consensus, that there was a political motivation, right, within the political elite and the current governing class, including ministers in the current government, to not let certain data sets be available, because those data sets will reveal how bad certain situations are, and that could be weaponized by the political opposition. And therefore, they say they are seeing cases where both administrative data and survey data, government actually is investing in those data sets, collecting it. We go through the full process. We go for validation workshops. So you can see that, the analytic institutions in government are doing the work of the data being available. Then at the point of releasing the data, we just hear, don't worry, we'll release it. Don't worry, we'll release it. Then 12 months passes, 1 year passes, 1.5 year passes. And so the consensus and by the way, these are not politicians, and these are purely the analytic layer of development, those that use the data to do analysis so that they can inform. The general feeling was there's no political will for data accountability in Nigeria, and so we should stop wasting our time. Because you have history, people that can open ancient and modern are very helpful with these conversations. I mean, what's your view about that? And if that's the case, what can we do about it? Because, we are sitting down here discussing something on which the entire thing is premised on this data governance. So, if that's not the case, help us. If that might be the case, right, I don't want to put you on the spot, how might we go about helping? Because it's almost a default failure if the data then doesn't come.
Thanks. Well, I don't mind you putting me on the spot, because I'm actually not ever afraid to be quoted, because I say what I think, and people are free to disagree. So let's look at it in this way. Oh, I'm sorry, just a minor correction from what you said earlier about my role in data in HCD. I don't actually have a role. I just help to manage Rukaya's grant, and we share the same office, and whenever they call me to do anything, I do it, and I ask who's going to compensate for my time. And they tell me that's why we gave you a national honor of Officer of the Order of the Niger. So everyone else gets a national honor for what they've already contributed. Me, I'm paying for my own every day by doing that. So, but the issue of data that you asked about, I'll talk about it in this way. One, politicians will always be politicians. You can't change that. And whatever you're doing, you need to factor that into your design. That politicians will be politicians. They will use every leverage they can get to achieve their political aims. So that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is that, and so for that reason, I'm not one to blame politicians because, like I said, they are what they are, right? So, but the issue then is, what is the institution of state that can force a particular behavior from politicians? And so our mutual friend, Yemi Kale, faced this situation. He was constantly under pressure by politicians to do this or not do that, or do this survey or not do that survey. But he had integrity and he had a professionalism that meant, no, I'm going to release it as it is, and then you do with it what you want. So we also need to ensure that the official statistician is held to account in the way that they do that job. And if the private sector is feeling that way, if civil society is feeling that way, if government is feeling that way, if opposition is feeling that way, then it needs to be addressed. Because under the previous statistician general, everyone felt whatever this guy announces is likely to be the truth, right? So that credibility is particularly key. The third thing to say is, even within that credibility, you need to be able to negotiate your way through the environment, because the politician has their need on one side, the professional statistician has their need on the other side. The two may not always gel, but thank you for pointing out that I'm old when you said the ability to link the ancient to the current. But I'll give you one example. There was a nationwide survey we did, which we had the National Bureau of Statistics do for us on the state of service delivery in Nigeria generally. And one of the things that the survey found was that in the last 3 years of Jonathan's government, before we did that survey, corruption had actually gone up. And so I took it, of course, I was reporting to the Secretary to Government, so I went to say, we've done this survey. There were other interesting findings, actually, including that the police had 70% approval rating in rural areas, right? So in rural areas, nobody complains about the police. Nobody says they are corrupt. I mean, nobody has 200 naira to give them anyway. But they are the ones that settle disputes. They are the ones that keep the peace and all of. So the approval ratings in rural areas widely different from that in urban areas. So there are very many different findings that we had. But the one that the Secretary to Government picked out was this one about there has been an increase in the rate of corruption. And so the first thing he said to me was, can we change it? I said, no, that's impossible. It was done by the National Bureau of Statistics. It's not me that said it. We went to every single ward in this country. We talked to the private sector, we talked to everybody, and this is what they said. And then he said, well, we're facing elections in 2 months' time. Can you delay its release? I said, yes, that one I can do. I can't change it, but I can delay the release until after the elections. And as it happens, the result of the elections proved the validity of that survey. So the statistician can also be sensible. Nobody is saying, go and do something that gets you fired, because they will not just bring another person that will do their bidding. So you also need to be sensible in the way that you do these things. But in conclusion, I know that impression may be there. I don't know what the actual position is, but I know that my colleagues here from the government will tell you that there has been a serious paucity of releases. Serious. Yeah, I mean, the government is running 3 budgets, none of which are funded. So it's easy to say they haven't done this survey, or because the politician is hiding something. Sometimes it could be as simple as we simply don't have the money to do it. There's no ulterior motive. There's no what I'll always say is, no matter how counterintuitive it is, let us always assume good intentions first. Thank you.
Can we give Dr. Joe a hand? Let me add, I always say, always take the liberty to then go beyond the counterintuitive and just go and sit down and have a conversation. So people say I've become the conversation creator in chief, because I'll see a media post or see a piece in the newspaper. I'll call the guy up and say, okay, when can you fly to Abuja? Oh yeah, let's go and sit with the DG of so-and-so, or the ES and so-and-so, and then I'll say to ES, this is the man that wrote that piece. Okay, you, now explain yourself to them. Sometimes it triggers a rejoinder, because, just by asking the right questions, you get clear answers from our government colleagues. And I found in almost 90% of the cases, our government colleagues are actually willing to sit down and explain them. So you may not like the explanation, but they are willing to at least explain themselves. And I think that is something you can win on. To the representative of the minister, so let me flip the question, because the minister will punish me for not saying so. The other side is that you in the ministry are doing the opposite. You're actually building a meta database for education, right? My question now is the opposite, is that database comprehensive now enough to accommodate and solve coordination in all the UBEC data, all the state data, or is it another data, because I think it's called NESG, right? NESG or something. Is this now a comprehensive, because this is now authorized, this is now positive authorization. There's a policymaker that's given authorization for education sector-wide data to be collected, with the finance, with the investment, with the authorization behind it. So can we say, when you're done, we will not look anywhere at federal or state, all the data will be in one place?
Thank you very much. Yes, I think you must praise the Federal Minister of Education under the leadership of Dr. Tunji Alausa, CON. Nobody has dared to do it, and he has done it. It's a very robust, an education data. And like we all say, without data, what can you really do? You are just flying in the blind, okay? The essence of NESG would be that at the end of the day, in fact, the minister has a dashboard in his office where on the dashboard you can see enrollment, data about even students. In fact, now, if you enter a primary school now, you'll be given a unique identifier number that will follow you all through your education career up to PhD. So at the end of the day, like you've asked, is that it's going to be extremely comprehensive such that, and the funding, because what you are going to ask me next is how will it get funded? The funding has been structured such that it is continuous, it's not warehoused, it's not going to be affected by budget and all of that. It's on a first line charge with TED Fund and UBEC such that the funding is guaranteed for the nearest future. So at the end of the day, to answer you directly, to be that you don't need to go anywhere else. It will be a validated data on education in Nigeria.
So can we give the minister a hand? Because this conversation about data ecosystems, right? When he said it, that was my response. I said, Honourable Minister, please, when I go to a ward and I look at a school, just confirm to me that I can find my ward and the schools in my ward on your system, and that it is a verified data, because that's part of what we are missing. And then once you answer that first question, is it the type of data we need to measure the performance on HCD? Once you answer those two questions, and we can repeat that in health, in education, in labor, then we solve part of a problem that we are here discussing, which is using optimal political authorization and will at the point where it matters. So we will visit now to check that the HCI indicators on education that we need to measure can be measured from the, at least your system, database systems design. And please, if not, what we will then advocate is whether those adjustments can be made. Because I have seen what the back end might look like. My question is, let's not just build something that tomorrow we look at what is inside and we cannot use it. I'll come to my brother from the private sector last, especially because of the point you raised.
Please, sorry,
about
I don't know what I can just ask him a question, please.
Yes, I'm about to also give you the floor.
Okay.
So while you're answering that question, okay, ask a question. Yeah, sure, please go on.
Okay, please, I come from Ministry of Youth Development. Anything that has to do, anything that is youth focused is our interest. Can we share that data with you? Is it possible?
I think a conversation can take place. A lot of ministers have come to see it, and I'm sure that we can, after this, we can have a chat as to perhaps when your minister at that level can also talk to my minister. It's not hidden. You are government. It's a one government.
Sure.
So we are not as if we are operating in silos. The most important thing is that government must not operate in silos, especially at intergovernmental level. We must all behave as if we are one holistic government where we share data and act on those data.
Especially if the data is HCI plus, which is now, you look at the lifetime of a child you've trained with one unique identifier that you can track from, preschool all the way to 65 years. It can be so transformative, and that's why we hope that we can have a conversation whilst the system is still a bit on its robustness, how far we can take it. And I'm sure that it's something that the private sector guys will not mind looking at. I mean, if you're looking at the future workforce, future jobs, future entrepreneurs, and you can predict the number of that will convert. I'm sure there are many banks.
And let me say also the private sector is heavily involved in the development, but it's all Nigerian owned. It's within our control. Okay. And the back end is also Nigerian.
Okay. Just one question back on, because of the youth development dimension, we've said Nigeria will be younger for longer. We've said not only are we younger for longer, we will be the youngest nation on earth in 25 years. When you look at NYSC and its scale and scope, one of the conversations people have is that the NYSC needs to be transformed. And maybe Dr. Joe can jump in. And I know there's a reform committee looking at how to transform it. From your view in the field, and maybe then from Dr. Joe's field as one of the reformers in the room looking at it, what must change? And this is not us being judgmental. We know we have run and where it is, but what must change for it to be fit for the kind of future we want? It used to deliver certain values. Then all of a sudden, the youth stop seeing value in it. How do we get it back there, and what must change?
Okay, thank you very much. Just as I said earlier, if you happen to visit any orientation camp, you want to do your service again, I'm telling you.
Now?
Yes.
Okay.
So one thing that must change is orientation. National Orientation Agency has to do a lot of work. Everything is not all about white-collar job. I tell you, if you go to camps, you see solar, and this solar something, you don't even require huge capital.
You know this will get to social media.
To start out. I'm telling you, yes. Yes. You don't even require up to 100,000 naira to start
the millenniums
out in solar energy. So there must be reorientation. We have to tell our youth, it's not all about white-collar job. I'm telling you, Dr. Joe knows very well, if you go to any side camp, you want to go for your service again. But they have that impression in their mind to go to government and look for a job and now, cast away whatever they have learned in camp. Though for a very short period, 3 weeks is not enough. But I tell you, you need to see their products, boots. you think it's made from China. I'm telling you. So they don't have that. They have that orientation of looking for job. They already have. So but the moment they leave camp, they just cast away whatever they have learned. If most of us had that opportunity, we won't look for job after youth service. So they must have a change in orientation.
Okay, Dr. Joe, please collect the mic, because I have a combination of millennials in my house and Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, and their orientation about what should be the use of youth's time is very different. However, we are dealing with a gap. The gap is so big that I hear your point, sir, that all of us cannot simply look away from blue-collar, type work and hope to put Nigerians to work. But are we still missing something? So what would change for you?
Well, I am aware that a memo has gone to Mr. President, so I don't want to preempt that. So a memo has gone to the President suggesting, or rather recommending, a number of things that should change. But what I can say is that our hope is that with the new NYSC, when Mr. President approves, people should leave camp not looking for work, but looking to create work. So that's one fundamental thing that will change. The other things that I'll say in form of questions. Do we still need this military orientation that we inherited from the military? Do we still need it? Do people still need to parade at 5 o'clock in the morning? Do they still need to wear khaki to wear? Right? So all of those things need to change. And then what value is the camp delivering to the individual? Right? So like you said, if you speak to a number of people, a number of young people, they have an impression that all the government does is take from them. Right? That's all the government does. It takes from us. It doesn't really give us anything. So we go to this camp, and then you post us to go and teach in Zamfara. And so, and you're paying me 70,000 naira, and you can't even guarantee accommodation for where I'm going. You can't. So what am I really gaining from this 1 year of service to the government? So we need to change that. We need to offer value to the young people such that when they come out of camp, it's not just about they are serving the country. It's also about the country giving them what to leave the 1 year with. So that's what we're trying to work on.
Yes, the ministers.
Yes, I just want to, in agreement with what he has said, and also to say that we must give our youth some credit. When we launched the TVET platform, I'm sure, Dr. Tayo, you are aware, within 3 weeks, 1.2 million youths registered, verified. And that is what has led to about 160 of them going into training in centers all over the country. So our youths, on the average, are ready and willing to work. It's just for all of us, not only government, but the private sector, to give them some help in amassing this, And they are extremely brilliant people. Nigerian youths are extremely brilliant. In fact, it's just that some of them is being misused into Yahoo and so on. But even when you dive into the Yahoo, the kind of innovations they are able to bring to break whatever systems come from abroad and all of that. So I think it's the channeling and the opportunity we offer them that will make the difference. Otherwise, in fairness to them, they are willing and able to work.
It's very interesting you say that, because there is a study about out of school phenomenon in the Southeast, And there was a sub-demographic in the Southeast, the young men, that basically, by the way, looked at blue-collar jobs and said, rather than go and spend 6 plus 4 plus ASU strike, maybe 14 or 18, wasting our lives, and a dedicated apprenticeship program of 8 years will get us to a bankable job ceded to us with capital by our master and guaranteed by his credit and his integrity to succeed in a value chain. And they make the bet to go with it. And that's a blue-collar job. But they've done it because of credibility, almost the guaranteed nature of the pathway, the commitment of the mentoring program, okay, and then the success rate. And so what we found, just by the way, on blue collar, is that when the youth can see these characteristics of any program, and it doesn't have to be NYSC, they will commit to it. And so maybe in rethinking the NYSC model, go from your first intervention about how the skill training is not tied to something else, and maybe that's the problem. Because if the young man in the East has opted out of formal school because he can see a pathway, guaranteed, and the success rate is almost 93%, something tells you that that is not working by mistake. It's working by a set of systemic commitments, and that might be something to explore, even in how we are thinking of how NYSC adds value. Back to you, sir. Private sector, your biggest message was advocacy and awareness. If we were to make you the advocate in chief, let's leave Orientation Agency of Nigeria, how would you design it?
Okay.
I mean, you've listened to all this information now, so how would you design it?
There's nothing to design. The structure is there. You have Voice of Nigeria. You have NTA. If the president wants to do a live broadcast, every station will hook up.
So the president should say something about it.
So the president, some days ago, it was captured on the news and said, local governments are getting more money. People should be looking at the local governments and hold them accountable. That should be translated. You put me advocate in chief. That what you said? The next day, that should be turned around, sent to local government messages through all the media, pushing everyone, letting everybody know who their local government chairmen are, like abroad. Everybody knows their emails, everybody knows their numbers, and let democracy work. When everybody knows what every local government is getting, everyone, every month, and there is the structure, as I said, the structure is there. The information goes round under the ambit of democracy making it work. Trust me, next 3 months, things will change. So for me, you put that, that's a quick win. And that's a quick win I think this government should do.
Okay, fantastic. Do you have enough time to open the floor for questions? Are there questions online for the panel? So, yes, please.
Sorry, no, I just, in case I don't get the opportunity to do so, I also wanted to tie in some of the presentations I heard earlier to this discussion. So the issue of data and measurement is really important, and that's why the work of the Global Compact Network is vitally important in my view. I started to look at the way the private sector uses corporate social responsibility as an example. And I learned to my horror that the private sector is actually woefully poor at measuring impact. They can tell you, you know, I dug 20 boreholes for this community, I did this and I did that, so how many people now have drinking water? So how has that reduced the disease burden? They have zero idea. And so the private sector needs to develop a means of measuring its impact in the HCD space. That's the first thing I want to say about that. The second thing is that a lot of the presentations that I heard today about participation of the private sector and raising capital all sounded like charity, which is why the archetypes you set out is very important. Yes, there's a philanthropic aspect to it, but I think we need to go beyond that. We need to start to think about, maybe I'm talking as reformer in chief now, having had advocate in chief. Yeah, so maybe we need to start to think about it from, say, a government perspective. Could I give any sort of tax breaks for any private sector organization that contributes to human capital development? Can we do that? Can we give any sort of recognition? Tayo, you remember the Investor in People scheme in the UK then. So just having that badge, that this company is an investor in people, gives you a certain credibility and a certain level of respect among people. Can government put in place such a scheme that says, okay, you know, this is a partner, this organization, they can use it on their letterhead. We're a partner for human capital development in Nigeria, and there will be the federal government coat of arms or whatever that they can use in their advertising and in their so that there is a what's in it for them. You know, you can appeal to the conscience of the private sector. Oh, you need to do CSR, but CSR is another form of advertisement. It doesn't matter how you spin it. They are not doing it because they are nice people or that they care. They are doing it as an advertisement. And so you can help to structure that so that the what's in it for them is clear. They can see an incentive to invest in this initiative. The final thing I want to say is just about, and I talked about the issue of coordination, and it's really, really important. It may not be all of HCD that the private sector might be well placed to focus on. You can choose out of Rukaya's 6 indicators. You can choose the 2 or 3 that the private sector is best placed to make a direct contribution to and to show an impact, such that you can say, okay, through the help of the private sector, we've been able to affect a change in this regard. And just finally, I'm getting to be like you, because when you were presenting, your next slide was always the final slide, but it kept, but it kept going. So finally, so finally, it's just to be able to frame the narrative properly. Right? So if you frame the narrative properly, you can have the private sector all pulling in the same direction. And anybody that now wants to contribute knows that there's a framework, there's a narrative, this is what I'm joining. Because at the moment, like I said, you get big private sector organizations that are doing fantastically well, the Dangote Foundations, and many of them are doing fantastically well, but there's no guardrails, there's no framework. Each person does what they like, and we are grateful for it. So if we all choose to dig 10 boreholes in the same compound, we can do it because there's no framework and no regulation. So I just wanted to say that in case I don't get the opportunity to do so, but yeah, thank you.
So let's just take questions and comments online, and we go round, and then we begin with Celine. We have the first go on the physical audience. So can we just take them all at once?
Yes, please.
If they are directed to anyone, say so.
No, and there are not many.
Okay.
I agree that foreign direct investment is key to sustainable development, but I wonder why Nigeria requires investments without always showing tangible outcomes from these investments. Ms. El Rufai talks about a $100 million investment from the Japanese. Is there an evaluation framework designed to monitor these projects? Is the Nigerian Evaluators Association involved? Then we said, same person says, okay, that's, okay, another comment, or a comment now, military regiment, okay, no. Dr. Tayo, alternative pathways is laudable, but the value attached to artisanship, vocational jobs, and the likes must be embedded in national policy. Government policy is a key driver to paradigm shift in capacity building. Another comment, every state, every department, every ministry, every institution, local government, etc., every government must have a monitoring and evaluation department within their offices. All the panelists should tell us if they have one. I yield.
Well, the government people, over to you. Whether you have M&E functions.
Yeah, so...
and then what was the other one for government? There was the...
It's both M&E related.
Yeah,
the first around FDI. So, you know the nature of that climate finance and for clean cooking, their markets. So it's either is jurisdictional, which is country-led. Our framework right now hasn't covered that, but for voluntary markets, they're actually global frameworks that the M&E has to conform to, which the off-takers would not even off-take if it doesn't meet those standards. And even the assessors, the people that will come and do the M&E, they are certified by those bodies. There's Vera, there's Gold Standard, there's COSIA. So that's like a totally different investment pool with their own kind of protocol around carbon credits. From a government perspective, the NCCC has, launched the carbon market framework. At a point, I was the secretary of the committee. We brought EY to design the framework. So that is completely different for that type of capital. Honest truth is, I've never heard of that organization because that's the first thing he asked me. So probably you two need to do a bit of your awareness around that. And then in terms of M&E, whether we have M&E, that's why we made that presentation with the Secretariat. It's one of our pillars, the MEAL, the monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. But from a government perspective, Ministry of Budget and Planning has an M&E unit. Yes, but for the whole country, actually.
No, for the government.
Yes. Then there's policy coordination, Hadiza's delivery unit, which Dr. Joe was very instrumental to designing. And I do see pockets of the M&E, but if we resolve the fragmentation and address that whole of society that Dr. Joe was talking about, I'm sure then probably a holistic M&E framework that can include this body. Probably you can come in to partner, to help create the framework based on any theory. We design a theory of change for it and take it forward.
Okay, so I think the two questions have been answered.
Please, sorry, I want to say something about M1E.
Okay.
Please, sorry. If you go to every core ministry that has PRS department, M1E is a division, but there are two issues there: funding for M1E, and number two, capacity. Because you can have monitoring, but of evaluation. You understand? Evaluation is more logical, more scientific. So many people will say they are going on monitoring, but there's little or no evaluation. Thank you.
Celine?
Yes, just before I pass the mic, please, I apologize to Adeola Awogbemi, that's the name of the person who asked the question and made a comment. Also, Olabode Ezekiel made a comment. Thank you very much. Sorry that the names were not mentioned earlier.
I think, I just want to speak broadly around investments. There's a general misconception that for the private sector, that the only way they contribute to development, especially human capital development, is through CSR. I mean, that is completely wrong. The core activities of the private sector actually does contribute significantly more to development than CSR. And I'll give you a very simple example. So the larger group that I'm from, which is Hess Holdings Group, we're very strong in power sector. And generate about 20% of Nigeria's electricity through 2 power plants. And of course, there's a distribution company in Abuja. If you look at power sector alone, you cannot have any meaningful development without reliable electricity in the country. So whether it's security, education, healthcare, nearly every sector. And that's one sector that requires significant investment for us to get there. I mean, today we only generate about 6,000 megawatts. Even for the ones that we generate, it's about 1,200, we're owed about 700 billion naira. There's no, think about any business that is owed about 700 billion because of subsidy, and you're still standing on your feet. So what am I trying to say? The real, I think from a government point of view, I think the bigger contribution should actually be creating that enabling environment through the right policies, the right framework to allow the private sector function optimally. Then we would have dealt with all these issues. So just relying on CSR or relying on handouts through aids won't get us anywhere. Thank you.
That was something that was raised yesterday about market failures, institutional failure, and how that constrains how much private sector can do in terms of expanding the economy to do way, way, way much more. I think the number we looked at was if the private sector performs properly, really 90% of all your employment, for an economy that has a potential of our size would naturally come
100%.
from the private sector and drive. So for example, we have 90% currently, but if you look at the segments providing the jobs, there are MSMEs that are struggling. Right, which then means that those jobs are, low elasticity, low income, vulnerable jobs. Now, if the economy does well, those MSMEs become more productive, more profitable,
Absolutely.
And those jobs move to decent jobs. And so there's an economic side to the conversation, no doubt. I guess what Dr. Joe is saying is that the CSR you're spending, less if you spend it properly. Solid, yeah.
Thank you, and I understand now why you came before me, because you said exactly what I wanted to say. But I will not give up. I will give an example. It's very, very true, and this way of looking at private sector involvement through CSR is extremely limited. We in UNICEF did a little analysis of how much the annual budget of CSR is in Lagos for a company based in Lagos. It's around $100,000 per year. We can't. There's about 2,000 companies, big companies in Nigeria altogether. This doesn't amount to much. What we have done in UNICEF and in our what we call Generation Unlimited Nigeria, which is now going to be lodged within the OVP, and which is in support of youth transitioning from learning to earning, is to align private sector's business models to our mandate. So I'll give you a very powerful example. I think Dapo has left us now from IHS Towers, but IHS Towers and Airtel, MTN are big partners of the initiative. Our first pillar of work is connectivity and digital learning. To do that, to connect all the schools that the Federal Ministry of Education wanted to connect to the Nigeria Learning Passports. I'll spare the details for this, but we spoke to partners like IHS Towers and said, is your business plan for this year covering this LGA to ensure that these schools are connected to the internet, yes or no? If it's a yes, bingo, you go. In 2 weeks, it's done. The schools are connected, but the whole community is connected. The intention here is to have other partners, the MNOs as well, that are providing the routers, the SIM cards. It's all about market penetration, right? It's all about profit. But it's also profit for us as we are stimulating this HCD. So that was my first point, and I think it's very important to look into that because there's a lot to be done with that rather than CSR. The law on CSR, is it been passed?
Well, it's going to be passed.
Okay.
It seems as if it's going to make it before the end of this assembly.
All right, great. And then my second point was on entrepreneurship. I was very surprised, actually. I think I only saw entrepreneurship in your presentation. I'm not an economist, but the world's economic fabric is 90% of MSMEs, and Nigeria is not going to be different, right? You said it, we need to create 5 million jobs per year. We're not going to do that through just making sure that the private sector are ready to take on our young people or not so young people. But we need to focus, laser focus on entrepreneurship, and we need to make sure that the environment enables entrepreneurship. But who teaches entrepreneurship? Today, if you look around, there's a lot of people who teach entrepreneurship. ILO does it at a cost. The Tony Elemelu Foundation does it, but it's a Pan-African measure, right? If you look at the numbers actually in Nigeria, it's very small. Many other people do it. How do they do it? What's the quality of the skills taught? Teaching is one thing, incubating is another. How do we make sure that these become solid businesses, etc., that can actually hire? You mentioned it. Yeah, they could only hire one person per year. So all of this coordination, I come back to what you were saying, is hugely important. My question after all this is, do we have this is a mammoth enterprise, right? The amount, we listen to ministries and we hear their work is still very siloed. It's the same in UNICEF. Health doesn't talk to nutrition and education doesn't talk to child protection. You know, that's just the devil or the elephant in the room. But do we have the expertise in-house in the current government right now to make sure that this mammoth work that we're talking about can actually be, because sustainability is important, no doubt, but expertise is hugely important. That's my question.
So that's an interesting question. The resident rep and ourselves have been having a conversation as to, yes, the UN system doesn't have as much resources as it used to have, but it still has a monumental amount of technical capacity in Africa and around the world. And how do you work with the UN and with expertise in the private sector to organize in such a way that the capacity we need for this mammoth level national effort is assembled in the right way? And I think that that's something that, again, with Kakovid we learned that if you want to assemble any set of specialists you want, and there's a will to do it, and we all agree that we'll do it together, you can find it. So I remember that we were in the room with epidemiologists, the best in the private sector, the best in government, the best in the development sector, and the best we had overseas. I remember we flew in Sani in the middle of the shutdown. It was here, I think Funke, and so there were a few people, flew 3 of them from China in the middle of the lockdown, sent a private jet to pick them and bring them back. So, by the way, when we are ready, and I hope we're ready to do some of these things, pulling even if it's lean capacity, pulling it together and focusing it at a single point becomes really possible. And I would say we don't have all the capacity we need, and maybe that's why we were interested in thinking about how do you pull together organizations that do the same type of work, so that they are concentrating in such a way that they're a cluster of work. So the ecosystem builders. So we have, for example, a foundation called Faith Foundation. Maybe it's the most sustainable foundation that has done entrepreneurship at scale that succeeds, at scale that succeeds. And then the question is, how do you take that type of player and say, can we work with you to build a bigger ecosystem, right? And give you the entrepreneurship bit. So we will not try and do entrepreneurship. No, we're going to say, yourself, Tony Lomelu Foundation, another big ecosystem player in entrepreneurship, how can we create around that a cluster that we're not trying to change what you do, but you do it well, you have the competencies, you know how to do it, help the country with the pieces that we struggle with, and move that piece forward. And I think that has to be the way to think about it if we're going to win together.
That's consistent with what we're thinking about NYSC.
The mic, please.
No, I was just saying that is consistent with what we're thinking about NYSC to bring people who have done it and succeeded at doing it, to just take on the entrepreneurship education.
Yeah.
But yeah, beyond NYSC, there are millions that are not in universities. There's the Igbo apprenticeship scheme that you've talked about. So we just need to use a plethora of ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. But you make a second point about I think, private sector investment. The truth is, there's a way I de-risk an opportunity using philanthropy that a bank will come, right? So how we sequence investments matter, right? So the governor of Niger State, for example, and his 100,000 hectares of land, the other day he basically said, but you guys are complaining that the reason why you can't de-risk agricultural land is CO4. Fine. So he signs off the 100,000 hectares of CO4 and hands it over, actually, says to Murphy, come and pick the entire CO4. So you're holding it. Right. I have de-risked it for you, right? And as soon as that happened, Murphy could now lock in those transactions they needed that was based on the absence of a CFO. And on the back of that, they basically called the private sector in and said, okay, those of you doing business, and this is de-risking, those of you doing business in Niger already, how much of the hectares available can you take? So there's Olam there, there's TIG there, they're already there. They're not just saying take it now. If you are a banker of Olam or TIG, you naturally can go along because these are also entities that are winning, right? They're not, and then of course the question then was, okay, who else can come along with renewable energy? Then the second question we asked is that who else has de-risking money in government? REA could take a mini grid, right? Family homes could take housing. So back to your coordination question. So you see, these are government entities holding public funds, but they can now take their money to a location where the first de-risking has happened, right? And it's within that environment we can then say, okay, can we take 10,000 hectares of that land and do macronutrients-focused interventions with fortification, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that becomes bankable because of what has come along. So I think that at 32,000 feet, we can't see things like that. I think we're going to see things like that state by state, talking to states, asking what can come together, sitting with governors, the HCD councils, to really look at the nuance per state. And I know 36 states plus one looked like hard work, but the truth is, at 32,000 feet, everything looks like what it looks like, right? It's on ground at the front line that the transformation will really happen. Mohammed, you're holding the mic.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to maybe respond to some of the things that were said. So for me, I really like the points about financial inclusion because it actually goes beyond financial inclusion. At the heart is identity management. Once you are financially included, you are recognized as a person, as an entity, and then it allows you to avail yourself of different services. I think it's really important for us because we don't really know how many we are, where we are, all of those things. So if we could use financial inclusion as one of the means for identity management, I think it's a good one. Dr. Joe, this one is for you. Coordination between government MDAs. It seems whenever there's a problem, the reflex is to create a new institution rather than fixing the existing one. Then you create institutions that have overlapping mandates and they just keep fighting. And anybody that wants to engage doesn't know who to engage with. Or if you engage with one, another one comes and says, it is me, then whatever you're trying to do becomes paralyzed. So I don't know how we are going to be able to resolve this issue. Then, Oga, you spoke to something, I think, if you move that camera, I can speak freely. But since it is on me, let me manage my words very well. So orientation, National Orientation Agency. I mean, who are we? What are we? What do we stand for? Nobody knows. The function of that agency goes beyond just saying, oh, hold your local governments accountable. It goes beyond that. What does it mean to be a Nigerian? What is the shared identity that holds us together collectively? It's not really there. And I think even with the menace of social media, where so many different narratives are flying all about the place, it takes government sometimes 2-3 weeks to become aware of a narrative, and then they try to correct it. By then, the damage has been done. People have moved on to the next thing. So, because this has been a topic that has been of interest to me, just out of curiosity, I always try to follow the amounts allocated to that agency for budget. And I just did a quick search again. So 2022, 8.1 billion was awarded as overall NOA budget. 7.2 billion was for personnel costs. Look at that. 324 million was for overhead costs. 575 million was for capital projects. And you go down to 2023, 2024. In 2025, there was a slight increase, 14.5 billion overall, but then 13.4 as personnel costs, 600 as overhead, 450 as capital projects. In all of this, more than 90% of that allocation is going for personnel costs. So really, what are we doing and what is going on? And with that, I hand over the microphone to somebody. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have a rapid, I need to bring this to an end. We're going to have a rapid 1 second last word. So another lightning round. And this time, lightning round is you have to be optimistic about closing this panel before the people on social media just think, nothing's going to happen. You know? So on an upbeat note, just knowing the resilience of Nigerians, the arc of what is possible to us, and the fact that we are our own rescue. This is one of those things where you do nothing about it, and you come back in 10 years, it's just worse. But there is no salvation from anywhere else. So, in fact, you don't have any option but to obey. So what will be your upbeat last word for us? Let's go rapid fire from you, and then I will just say the grace.
No, I think for me, look, we have all the solutions and answers. The challenge we have is execution. So let's get it done.
For me, Nigerians are amazing in self-organizing, so it's to create the enabling environment. And I think everything will fall into place.
For me, I think that we're on the right track. The renewed hope agenda, as far as education is concerned, is on the right track. So far, we've been able to, solve a lot of the intractable problems that have lingered in education for decades. So I think Nigerians must not, and I repeat, must not lose hope in our country. All hands must be on deck, and I think the future is bright. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, for me, from the private sector, I will say I was a bit impressed. I came here, I listened to when the SA did our presentation, and what I saw in a lot of dots were not so much focus on government, but a lot of effort already done with other agencies and even key stakeholders externally. So it gives me hope, And I think we should be hopeful. It looks promising.
So I get this a lot, particularly when I go on TV, where the interviewer spends 5 minutes asking you the question and gives you 1 second to answer. And that's what Tayo has done again. But no, I think the optimism for me is that the HCD debate is live. I mean, I was at the launch of the World Bank's country development framework, and they talked about poverty reduction, jobs, early child development as being the key things they want to talk about. Rukaya has mentioned that virtually in every speech that the president makes, you hear some reference to our human capital. I'm very happy that the private sector is talking about human capital development. I'm very happy that different arms of government are beginning to see the need to pull together. So coupled with the dynamism that Nigerians have, that gives me a lot of hope.
So there's this proverb that says, if you gather together and urinate, it produces enough foam. So we all have a stake everybody has a role to play. Nobody should sit on the fence and complain. Do you understand? So it's all about the chain. So we must all be change makers. We must have a role to play. Don't complain. Don't push the blame. So that's my contribution.
Thank you.
And all I have to say is thank you. We are honored by this very distinguished panel, and I hope those online have learned enough and stayed inspired, and to our very scanty room. There's hope.